I will tell you this plainly, because I have never learned another way to speak, and because Marin Ashby, if she ever reads these pages, will put them down the moment she detects a performance. I was 41 years old before I understood what I had done, 38 when I did it. The 3 years between those numbers are the subject of this account, or rather, one season within them, the autumn I let her leave, and the winter I spent learning what that cost. My name is Edmund Harwell. I am the 6th Duke of Dunmore. I have managed 4 estates, 2 parliamentary committees, and the dissolution of a regiment in the field, without once losing my composure in public. I lost it, comprehensively and in private, in the library of Dunmore Park on a Tuesday morning in November, approximately 6 hours after Marin Ashby's trunk was loaded onto the Thirsk coach. I am getting ahead of myself. That is unlike me. She would find it gratifying. Dunmore Park sits on the eastern edge of the North York moors in the last fold of high ground before the land drops toward the vale. It is a severe house, my father's word, and he meant it as praise. Gray limestone, north-facing principal rooms, windows that in winter frame only sky and the suggestion of the dale below. It does not welcome. It endures. I have always thought this appropriate. My father's sister, Lady Constance Harwell, had lived in the East Wing since her husband's death in 1817. She was not, in the traditional sense, an easy woman. She was particular about her correspondence, her medicines, her reading schedule, and the precise angle at which her morning curtains were drawn. She had gone through 4 companions in as many years before my father's solicitor found Marin Ashby, the daughter of a clergyman from Whitby, recently deceased, with a small estate dissolved by debt and 2 younger brothers placed with a maternal uncle. Marin came to Dunmore at 22, with a single trunk, a letter of introduction written in her own hand because there was no one left to write it for her, and no expression I could read. I met her on the afternoon of her arrival. She was standing in the entrance hall with the housekeeper, Mrs. Dent, examining a list. She did not curtsy immediately when I entered. She finished reading the line she was on, set the paper to her side, and then curtsied briefly, correctly, without apology for the half-second's delay. I noted it, I did not mention it. She lasted, as I said, 7 years. This was not an accident. Lady Constance was, in her way, a test of character. She changed her plans without notice, disputed household accounts line by line, and had a habit of dismissing companions mid-sentence with the phrase, "Yes, yes, I've heard enough." Marin managed her not by deference, but by a kind of calm, precise negotiation that I watched across 7 years, with something I did not name. She managed the household correspondence when Mrs. Dent was ill. She reorganized the East Wing's medical cabinet after the apothecary made an error, cross-referencing 3 pharmacy texts and writing a clear, indexed summary for future reference. When the Thirsk solicitor sent documents to Dunmore in error, a bundle of papers meant for an estate 3 villages north, she identified the misdirection within an hour, wrote the correcting letter herself, and placed the correct summary on my desk without being asked. The summary was better than anything my own secretary had produced that quarter. I read it twice. I said nothing to her. I told my secretary to improve his indexing. This is the part I find difficult to write, not because it reflects poorly on her. It does not, but because it reflects with uncomfortable precision on me. I was not cruel to Marin Ashby. I was, in the way that men of my position and temperament are cruel without meaning to be, simply unaware of her as a person rather than a function. She kept the East Wing running. She kept my aunt alive and organized and, on her better days, even contented. She translated between Lady Constance's requirements and the practical running of the house with a fluency that made the whole machinery silent. Silence in a house, I have since understood, is not the absence of effort. It is the evidence of someone working very hard so that no one notices the effort. I noticed the silence. I did not follow it back to its source. In the spring of my 38th year, it was decided, largely by Lady Constance, who had opinions about the succession, and by my man of business in London, who had opinions about the entail that I should marry. I was not opposed to the principle. I was opposed, as I was opposed to most administrative processes, to the noise and theater of it. A Miss Georgiana Pell was proposed. She was the daughter of a Derbyshire baronet, accomplished, pleasant, and entirely without interest in the running of an estate. She came to Dunmore Park in September for a fortnight's visit with her mother and her elder sister. They occupied the south guest rooms. They brought 4 maids between them. I will say this for Miss Pell. She was exactly what she appeared to be. There was no pretense in her, and no particular depth either. She played the pianoforte without passion and spoke French without precision, and admired the park in the phrases that parks are generally admired in. Her mother was more direct. She had done this before with the elder daughter, and managed the social calendar of the visit with the efficiency of a campaign. Marin, during this fortnight, became largely invisible. Lady Constance's needs did not reduce because there were guests. If anything, they increased, since Constance disliked disruption and expressed this through a proliferation of small demands. Marin accommodated them. I was aware of her moving through the house, a door closing, a tray organized, a letter dispatched, in the way one is aware of the house itself functioning. On the 4th evening of the visit, I was in the library after dinner. Miss Pell's mother had taken her daughters to the drawing-room. I had excused myself on the grounds of correspondence. I was not, in fact, attending to correspondence. I was standing at the window with a glass of brandy, which is what I do when a social evening has been more effortful than the work I use it to avoid. I heard Marin before I saw her. She came into the library from the connecting passage, the route through from the east wing, carrying a bundle of Lady Constance's amended household notes, which she intended to leave on my secretary's desk in the adjoining room. She did not know I was there. She moved quietly, as she always did, and I did not announce myself. Mrs. Pell was in the passage on the library's other side, the main corridor passage, speaking to her daughter. The door between was not fully closed. I heard Mrs. Pell say, "The house is well enough run. Who manages it?" "Miss Pell, there is a companion for the old aunt." "Mrs. Pell, the small woman, the one who brought the tonic." "Miss Pell, I imagine so. She seems efficient." "Mrs. Pell, companions are always efficient." "Is she of any consequence?" Then, and this is the part I have turned over in my mind for 3 years, I heard myself say, from the window, into the glass I was holding, "No, none in particular." I had not meant for it to carry. I had spoken, I think, in the reflex that men of my position use when they do not wish to engage with a social question, a flat, dismissive answer that closes a conversation. I meant, she is not a matter of social consequence, not a consideration in the running of the visit. She is an employee. She is managed. That is what I meant. It is not what I said. There was a pause of perhaps 2 seconds in the passage. Mrs. Pell said something pleasant and moved on. Miss Pell followed. In the library, nothing moved. I turned. Marin was standing at the entrance to the connecting passage, the bundle of notes held at her side. She had heard all of it. Her face told me so, not because she had an expression I could name, but because she had, for a single moment, no expression at all. It was the only time in 7 years I saw her defenses arrive late. Then she composed herself. She set the notes on the secretarial desk. She said, "Good evening, Your Grace," in the tone she used for precisely this caliber of interaction, not warm, not cold, professionally adequate, and went back through the connecting passage. I stood at the window. I did not call after her. I thought, she has heard worse. I thought, she is a practical woman, she will not make more of it than it is. I thought, in the way that men think when they know they have done something wrong and would prefer not to examine it. It will pass. It did not pass, but I did not know that yet. She left 11 days later. I did not witness it. I learned of it from Mrs. Dent at 7 in the morning, who who appeared at the door of my study with the expression of a woman delivering news she anticipated would be poorly received. "Miss Ashby has gone, Your Grace." I looked up from the dispatch I was reading. Gone where? "On the Thirsk coach, before 5. She left a letter for Lady Constance and a ledger for Mr. Graves, my secretary, with the East Wing accounts settled to the end of the quarter, and a list of notes for her replacement." I was quiet for a moment. "She gave notice." Mrs. Dent's expression shifted minimally. "A week ago, Your Grace, through Mr. Graves. I believe he mentioned it." He had mentioned it. He had mentioned that Miss Ashby was leaving at the end of the fortnight and that they would need to find a replacement for Lady Constance's companion. I had said, "See to it." I had not asked why. I had not sent for her. I had not, and here is the thing that I turned over and over in the weeks that followed like a stone with a sharp edge I could not avoid. I had not once in 11 days crossed the East Wing to speak with her. This is the part that does not reflect well on me. I knew something had been altered by the library evening. I knew it in the way one knows structural things, not as a named feeling but as a change in load. And I said to myself, she will work out her notice and the matter will resolve. Because I did not know what else to do with it, and because I had never, in 41 years of living, been required to go to a person and say, "I said a careless thing, and I am sorry for it, and I would like you to stay." She did not wait for me to learn. She simply left. The list of notes for her replacement was 17 pages long. It covered Lady Constance's medical schedule, her reading preferences, her communication habits, her particular requirements regarding the morning curtains and the evening tonic, and the precise wording to use when she was declining an engagement she did not wish to decline directly. It covered the household account discrepancies that Marin had been quietly tracking for 3 quarters. It covered a pending dispute with the Thirsk solicitor regarding a parcel of land in the eastern edge of the estate, a dispute she had identified, organized the correspondence for, and drafted the relevant response to, without it ever having reached my desk as anything but a resolved matter. It covered, in short, everything she had been doing that I had classified as the house running itself. I read it in one sitting. I set it down. I looked at the window. It was raining, the particular late autumn Yorkshire rain that is less a weather event than a permanent condition, and the park below was the color of old pewter. I said nothing to anyone. This is my way. Mrs. Dent knew better than to ask. The first 2 weeks, I did not acknowledge to myself that anything was wrong. I commissioned a replacement through the Harrogate agency. The woman they sent was named Miss Holbrook. She was competent, pleasant, and entirely unable to manage Lady Constance, who took against her within 48 hours and expressed this by refusing to eat her morning meals until the napkin was folded in a manner Miss Holbrook did not know, and Marin had apparently never needed to be told because she had discerned it 3 months into her time at Dunmore, and done it correctly ever since without comment. Lady Constance, to her credit, did not complain to me about Marin's absence. She complained about Miss Holbrook's deficiencies with great specificity and at length. She did not say, "I miss Marin," she said. "The girl doesn't know how I take my correspondence. She's put the Thirsk letters in with the London letters. Marin would not have done that. And she reads too slowly. Marin read at exactly the right pace. And there's a smell in the east sitting room. Marin would have found it by now." I listened to these reports from Mrs. Dent. I said, "Give Miss Holbrook time to find her footing." I said, "Make sure Lady Constance's medical schedule is being followed exactly." I said, on the 3rd occasion, "I will look into the Thirsk correspondence myself." I looked into the Thirsk correspondence. There were 4 letters that had been misfiled, one of which contained a time-sensitive response required by the end of the month, which Marin's 17-page ledger had flagged, and which Miss Holbrook had not known to look for because she had not been given the ledger. She had been given a 1-page summary, which my secretary had produced from the ledger, and which was, as I now found upon comparison, missing 3 of the 7 relevant points. I wrote the response to the Thirsk solicitor myself. It took me an hour and a half. Marin, I noted from the correspondence file, had drafted the previous 2 responses, which I had signed without amendment, in what appeared to have been approximately 20 minutes each. I sat with that for a while. By the end of the first month, I had replaced Miss Holbrook, not because she was incompetent, but because Lady Constance's health had declined in a way that Mrs. Dent attributed directly to stress and disruption, and I was not prepared to allow that. The second replacement lasted 3 weeks. The third was still in place by December, but at a cost in Lady Constance's equanimity that made the East Wing a site of low-grade, continuous difficulty. None of this was catastrophic. Estates run on systems, and systems, if they are built soundly, tolerate individual departures. Mine continued. The rents were collected. The parliamentary correspondence was managed. The winter maintenance schedule proceeded. Dunmore Park did not fall into disrepair because Marin Ashby was not in it. It simply became, and I am trying to be precise here because precision is what I have instead of eloquence, louder. Not audibly louder, but more effortful, more conscious. Things that had happened without my noticing them now required notice. Small problems that had never reached me now required my intervention. I began to understand in the accumulating ledger of that autumn and winter what the silence had been built of. I also began, in the privacy of my own library, and at times of the evening when I had drunk exactly 1 more glass of brandy than I needed, to think about the library. Not about what I had said, specifically. I knew what I had said, and I knew it was wrong, and the knowledge of it was not a new discovery but a recurring one, the same stone, the same sharp edge, the same arrival each time I put it down and picked it up again. What I thought about was her face in the moment before she composed it. 2 seconds, the pause in her defenses. In 7 years I had not once seen Marin Ashby unprepared. She was, and I mean this in the fullest sense of the word, not as a diminishment, professionally armored. She did not give the house access to her interior life. She was warm with Lady Constance in her contained way. She was correct with the staff. She was with me always exactly calibrated, present, efficient, and at a precise social distance that I had never attempted to cross because I had never thought to. 2 seconds. That was the distance between Marin Ashby's professional exterior and whatever existed beneath it. I had caused those 2 seconds. I had caused them by saying, into a brandy glass, in what I had intended as dismissal of a social question, that she was of no particular consequence. I turned this over for 3 months. I became, by the end of them, insufferable to be around. Mrs. Dent did not say so. My secretary did not say so. No one at Dunmore said so, because no one at Dunmore was in a position to say so to me. My cousin, Charles Harwell, who visited in December and stayed a week, said so, in the oblique manner of men who have known each other since boyhood and have developed a code for unpleasant truths. He said, "You're worse company than usual, Edmund," which is saying something. He said later, "Has something gone wrong at the estate?" And when I said no, he looked at me with the expression he uses when he knows I am lying and considers the odds of pressing it. He did not press it. We have known each other long enough that he knows when I will not be moved. What I did not say to Charles and did not say to anyone was this: yes, something has gone wrong. It went wrong in a library on a September evening when I opened my mouth without thinking, and the person who heard it had enough dignity and enough self-possession to leave without making me confront what I had done. And now, I have 3 months of very clear evidence that I have no idea how to confront it myself. I found out where she was in January. I did not hire an inquiry agent. I asked Mrs. Dent, who I had long suspected knew more than she disclosed. I asked her directly, which I should have done in November, and she told me, with the expression of a woman who has been waiting for precisely this question, that Miss Ashby had gone to Helmsley, a small market town, 18 miles north and west on the edge of the moors. She had a position there, secretary and household manager to a retired physician, Dr. Alistair Croft, and his elderly mother. She had found the position herself, through a Whitby connection, before she had ever given notice. She had been planning it, not for weeks, for months, possibly. She had seen what was coming, or at least had seen that what existed was not sufficient, and had made her arrangements with the same quiet, unannounced competence she brought to everything else. I sat with this for another week. I rode, I worked. I drafted 3 letters to her and burned them all, not because they were badly written. They were not, but because each one, when I read it back, contained some residual trace of the Duke of Dunmore explaining himself to an employee, rather than a man telling the truth to a person he had wronged. I burned the 4th for the same reason. The 5th I burned because it was too long and the length was a form of performance, which she would detect. On the 1st of February I told my groom to bring the road horse. I told my secretary I would be gone for the day. I did not take a manservant. I did not write ahead. I rode to Helmsley in the cold, alone, and arrived at Dr. Croft's house, a tidy, well-maintained townhouse on the market square, at 11:30 in the morning. I did not send in a card. I knocked. The woman who opened the door was not Marin. She was a housemaid, young, who looked at me with the alarm that people look at me with when I arrive unannounced on horseback in February. I said I wished to speak with Miss Ashby. I said I did not have an appointment. I said, and I want to be accurate here, because it was the first honest thing I had said in 4 months, that the matter was personal. There was a wait of some minutes. Then Marin came to the door. She looked, and I noticed this with the attention I had apparently been storing up across 7 years, exactly as she always had, and entirely different. The same. Her coloring, her posture, the precise containment of her expression. Different in the way that a person is different when they are in a place they have chosen for themselves, rather than a place they arrived in by necessity. She was wearing a dark wool dress that was not a companion's uniform. Her hair was arranged as it always was. She was calm. She looked at me the way she might look at a notation in an account that did not match the line above it, with attention, and a wait for further information. She did not say, "I am surprised to see you." She did not say, "Your Grace." She said, "You came alone." "Yes," I said. She considered this. Then she stepped back from the door. "Come in, then." Dr. Croft's parlor was small and warm and contained a great many books, organized by what I could see was a coherent system. Marin stood by the window. I stood because she had not invited me to sit, and because I did not feel that the chair was mine to take without invitation. This is not a feeling I have frequently. I noticed it. "How is Lady Constance?" she asked. "Difficult," I said. "She is on her 3rd companion since you left. She has found fault with all of them accurately." "She usually does," Marin said. There was a pause. "You should look for someone who trained as a nurse companion rather than a social one. She needs management, not company." "I know," I said. "I should have listened to you about that when you mentioned it in 2821. "I mentioned it in 1822, she said. "You said you would consider it." "I know." Another pause. She looked at me steadily. She was not going to make this comfortable. I had not expected her to. "I came to say," I began and stopped. I had practiced this, not in the sense of rehearsing lines, but in the sense of having been honest with myself in the library across 3 months about what needed saying. I came to say that what I said in the library was wrong, not incorrect, wrong. You were not present as a person in that conversation. You were used as a category, and you heard it. I knew you heard it, and I did not come to you. And that omission is something I cannot make a defense of, because I knew in November exactly what I should have done, and I did not do it. She was quiet. "I am not here to ask you to return to Lady Constance's service," I said. That is not what this is. I am here because you are owed an apology that should have arrived 4 months ago, and that I am only capable of delivering in person, and poorly." She said, "That is not poorly." I looked at her. That is quite precisely said, she said, for you. There was something in her voice that was not quite warmth but was adjacent to it. The tone she used, I recognized now, when she was choosing not to guard herself. I had heard it occasionally, across 7 years, when she spoke to Lady Constance about something she actually cared about, never directed at me. "Sit down," she said. "I'll have tea brought." We talked for an hour and 40 minutes. I know the duration because I was tracking it in the way one tracks the time available before a return journey becomes dangerous in winter light. I had not intended to stay more than 20 minutes. I had assumed, in the way I assume things when I have not interrogated the assumption, that she would receive the apology, make some courteous acknowledgement, and conclude the conversation. She did not conclude the conversation. She asked questions, not personal ones or not personal in the manner I was braced for. She asked about the Thirsk matter. She asked about the East Wing accounts. She asked, with a directness that I found I had missed more than I had named, whether I had actually read the correspondence from the York Committee regarding the drainage bill, or whether I had read my secretary's summary of it. "The summary," I said. "The summary left out the subsection regarding the eastern parishes," she said, "which affects the Dunmore tenants directly. I flagged it in a marginal note." I did not receive the marginal note. "No," she said without inflection. "I assumed you wouldn't. That is why I wrote a separate memorandum, which I gave to Mr. Graves." I did not receive the memorandum either. She was quiet for a moment. "Your secretary," she said carefully, "is very good at the correspondence he considers important. He is less consistent with the correspondence he considers peripheral." "I am beginning to understand that," I said. She looked at the window. "The eastern parishes matter," she said. "Several of the affected tenants are elderly. If the drainage clause passes without amendment, they'll face levies they can't absorb." "I know," I said. "I've been attempting to reconstruct the relevant file from memory and from what you left in the ledger." She turned back to me. Something shifted in her expression, not pity, not precisely, but a kind of reluctant attention, as though she had been watching me from a distance and found, against her intention, that the distance was insufficient. "I can tell you what the relevant subsection says," she said. "I remember it." "I know you do." "That is not why I'm telling you," she said. We established across the remainder of that conversation the following. She was content in Helmsley. Dr. Croft was an easy employer. The work was lighter than Dunmore and the intellectual reward less. She had been writing. She said this once briefly without elaboration, and I did not ask, because there are things one earns the right to ask. And she had, since arriving, experienced for the first time in some years what she described, with the precise language she used for things she valued, as a tolerable amount of quiet. I had taken that quiet from her. The 7 years at Dunmore had not been quiet. They had been, she said, again, with precision, sustainable and meaningful and frequently interesting, and latterly untenable. "Latterly," I repeated. "From approximately September." "Not before." She looked at me. "Before, it was sufficient to be useful. From September it became clear that the usefulness was the whole of it." I understood this. I did not say so immediately, because saying so immediately would have been a response to the content of what she said rather than to the weight of it, and she deserved the latter. "That was not I stopped, began again. I did not intend for it to be the whole of it." "I know you didn't," she said. "That is not exculpatory." "No," I agreed, "it is not." There was a silence, not uncomfortable. The specific kind of silence that Maren Ashby generated around herself when she was thinking, productive, oriented. "What do you intend now?" she asked. And here is where I departed from everything I had planned, which had not, in any of its drafts, extended past the apology, because the apology had been the limit of what I believed I had a right to. The rest I had not allowed myself to formulate, because formulating it would have required me to admit what 3 months of libraries and brandy and 17-page ledgers had been accumulating toward. I would like, I said, to determine whether there is anything I might offer that would bring you back to Dunmore. She said, as a companion. No, I said, not as a companion. Silence. I am not practiced at this, I said. I am aware of that. You are aware of it as well. I am not making a case from eloquence because I do not have one to make. What I have is this. I spent 3 months understanding what 7 years had contained. I did not understand it while it was happening because I did not permit myself to look directly at it. I am looking at it now. And I would like, if it is at all possible, and I am not asking you to decide today, the opportunity to demonstrate that I am capable of something other than treating you as a function. She looked at me for a long time, long enough that I became aware of the quality of it, not assessing, exactly, but measuring something she had been measuring for longer than this conversation. You would need to allow me considerably more latitude than you extended to Lady Constance's companion, she said. Yes. I would not return to Helmsley after 6 months, she said. If I came back to Dunmore it would have to be permanent. I understand that. I am not, she said carefully, making an answer now. I did not come for an answer now. She looked at me again. And there it was, not the 2 seconds in the library, not the absence of expression, but the opposite of it, something plain and unguarded and tired of being guarded, moving briefly across her face before she settled it. You rode 18 miles in February, she said. Yes. Alone. Yes. Without writing first. I burned 5 letters, I said. They weren't honest enough. Something happened to the corner of her mouth. Not a smile, or not only a smile. The expression of a woman who has been right about something for a long time and is finding it more complicated than she expected to be right. Come back on Thursday, she said. I will have an answer on Thursday. I rode back to Dunmore in the February cold and spent Tuesday and Wednesday in a condition I have no useful language for. I worked. I reviewed the York Drainage Bill subsection, which was exactly as Marin had described it, and I wrote to the committee myself directly, with the amendment argument laid out in 5 clear points, 2 of which I had developed from her marginal note, and 1 of which I had developed from a conversation with a tenant she had mentioned, in passing, in the Helmsley parlor. I finished the East Wing account review. I had a direct conversation with my secretary regarding his indexing system, which was long overdue. On Thursday I rode back to Helmsley, again alone. I arrived at 10:30. Marin came to the door herself this time. She said, I have one condition. I said, tell me. She said, I will not manage a household for you and manage a relationship with you at the same time. They are not compatible, and I have spent 7 years learning that I cannot be useful and present simultaneously in the same house. If I come back to Dunmore, I come back as one thing, not the other. I said, you come back as the one thing that matters. She looked at me with the expression she used for arguments she had expected, and had prepared for and now found, to her mild irritation, she was not going to use. That is very well said, she said, for you. I had 2 days to practice, I said. And there it was, the full version of the thing that had been moving at the corner of her mouth on Tuesday, not guarded, not measured, not composed. She said yes. We were married in March, in the small church in the village below Dunmore Park. My cousin Charles was present. Lady Constance attended in a wheeled chair managed by Mrs. Dent, and wore an expression of profound satisfaction that she would never have admitted to. There were 12 guests. There was no orchestra, no reception supper of 40 courses, no crowd of county gentry performing their approval. Marin had specified a small gathering. I had agreed immediately. Dr. Croft sent a letter. He said that he had suspected from her second week in his employ that she was too capable for Helmsley. He said this with the generosity of a man who knew he was losing his best employee and had decided to find it gratifying rather than inconvenient. I respected him for that. In the vestry, before we went in, the March light coming through the narrow vestry window, her in the gray-blue wool dress she had worn to Helmsley on the morning she left Dunmore, which I recognized, and which she saw me recognize, she said, with the precision she brings to things she means. I am not doing this because you rode to Helmsley in the cold. I am doing this because you burned 5 letters. I know, I said. The letters were the honest part, she said. The honesty was worth more than the writing. The writing, I said, was the only honest thing I had left after the letters. She looked at me. The vestry was cold. The church bell had not yet begun. We are going to argue, she said, quite a lot. I know, I said. I won't defer to you because of the title, she said. I would find it deeply alarming if you did, I said. And, she said, I will continue to tell you when your secretary has misfiled the eastern parishes. I am relying on it, I said. She straightened the cuff of her sleeve, a small, precise gesture, and looked toward the door of the vestry. The bell began. All right, she said, let us go. I will tell you what I understand now that I did not understand in that library, in September, with the brandy glass and the insufficiently closed door. Competence in the people we depend on most has a way of becoming invisible, not because we are careless necessarily, because competence is silent. Because the work of making things run well is, by its nature, the work of preventing anyone from noticing the work. Marin Ashby kept Dunmore Park functioning, kept Lady Constance alive and organized, and on her better days contented, kept the correspondence flowing and the accounts accurate, and the solicitors answered, and the tenants considered, in a silence so total that I had mistaken the silence for ease. She was not ease. She was effort so practiced it appeared as ease. There is a profound difference. I am not a sentimental man. I do not tell people that I love them in the manner of novels or drawing-room entertainments. But I will say, and this is the truest thing in this account, that the woman who showed me what I had in her by leaving with 17 pages of notes and no scene and no farewell address and no appeal to my conscience is the cleverest person I have ever known. She knew, I think, that I would not understand until the silence was mine and not hers. She gave me the silence. She let me live in it. 3 months was apparently what I required. I am told this is not especially long for a duke. She would disagree with that characterization. She has disagreed with a great many of my characterizations across the years since, with the particular precision she reserves for arguments she is confident she will win. She is usually right. I find I do not mind this as much as I might have expected. What I mind, what I have minded, every morning for the past 3 years, is that it took me as long as it did to go to Helmsley. Not the writing, not the 5 letters. Those were easy in the end. What was hard was admitting to myself in the library that the cost of what I had said was not hers alone to bear. She forgave me for the thing I said. I'm not sure I have entirely forgiven myself for the 11 days. But she would tell me, and she has told me once on a December evening when I brought it up, and she looked at me with the steady attention she uses for things that are settled and do not need to be reopened, that the 11 days are not the measure of it. The measure of it is what came after. I have been trying since to be the measure of it. She seems, for now, to find the effort sufficient. That is enough. That is, I find, exactly enough.